Chapter 21:14. The Demon Clan and the White Heaven Immortal Sect were in the midst of a fierce battle, when Gu Xingyin's words suddenly rang out. The Demon Emperor's order was above all else. The Demon Clan naturally retreated to the side without a word and acted as if they had given up. Although the people of the White Heaven Immortal Sect were a little puzzled, they did not act as if the enemy had stopped fighting. They all walked forward with a suspicious expression. This time, the White Heaven Immortal Sect was led by a body integration stage elder, Fa Ming. This kind of strength was enough to let the Demon Clan feel that the White Heaven Immortal Sect was taking this matter seriously. In fact, if the sect master of the White Heaven Immortal Sect was not so busy, he would have come personally and cut this little demon who dared to steal his precious son to death with a sword. Elder Fa Ming led the group of disciples behind him into the Demon Emperor Palace. He thought that he would be facing a trap. But in fact, apart from a few smiling maids and the charming Demon Emperor sitting on the throne, there was no one else in the splendid and magnificent hall. Oh no, there was also He Qianglu sitting below the Demon Emperor, dressed in white and with a temperament as indifferent as moonlight. The cultivators of the White Heaven Immortal Sect, led by Fa Ming, could not help but be a little stunned. This situation seemed a little wrong. In fact, in this world, the Demon Clan and the cultivation world had always been on good terms. Even when the Demon Clan wreaked havoc on the entire continent, the two sides were quite reliable allies. Of course, now that the close cooperation had long disappeared, the two sides could at most be regarded as well water and river water at most. It was precisely because of this relationship that Fa Ming and the disciples behind him only pretended to come knocking on the door, but did not kill. So there was no room for negotiation. Gu Xingyin looked at the group of White Heaven Immortal Sect disciples who were a little confused because of the unexpected situation and laughed softly. "Distinguished guests of the human clan, please take a seat." Her tone was gentle, and although her smile was coquettish, it was not offensive. The people of the White Heaven Immortal Sect sat down in a daze. The Demon Clan maids served the precious shame spirit fruit, as if they were entertaining distinguished guests. Fa Ming took some time to look up, and saw He Qianglu sitting at the head of the table with a calm expression. Occasionally, he would even take a sip of wine. He really didn't look like someone who was willing to compromise and suffer humiliation. Could it be that the information received by the sect was wrong? After all, he was here for this matter, so he didn't care about the delicacies beside him and directly said, "I'm a disciple of the White Firmament Celestial Sect. It's said that He Qianglu has been here for many days. The sect elders are worried and specially sent me to bring him back to the sect." Originally, they had received news that He Qianglu had been kidnapped by a demon emperor, who was lusting after beauties. He had come here to snatch He Qianglu away, and to take revenge. No matter how it looked now, since He Qianglu's behavior was different from the information they had received, his words naturally had a different meaning. No matter what, his goal was just to take her away. Gu Xingyin thought that the main event was coming. When she heard Fa Ming's words, a red glow suddenly appeared on her face. Bai Yin was originally very beautiful, and this appearance of a young girl in love was even more charming than the pink peach blossoms on the branches in spring. Many of the disciples of the White Heaven Immortal Sect were mesmerized by her. Suddenly, a cold aura swept past, causing their hearts to tremble. Everyone followed the aura and looked over, only to see senior brother He's lowered brows. Was it an illusion? 2 updates first, 2 more later. Chapter 21:15. Gu Xingyin said softly, "If you didn't come, I would have made a trip to the White Firmament Immortal Sect." Elder Fa Ming and the disciples. This development was not right. An ominous feeling rose in Elder Fa Ming's heart. He had a feeling that what the Demon Emperor would say later would be beyond his expectations. His intuition was quite accurate. The Demon Emperor Bai Yin, who was sitting at the head of the table, blushed slightly and said shyly, "During this period of time, darling, he and I have fallen in love and made a vow to spend the rest of our lives together. This time, we are preparing to go to the White Firmament Immortal Sect to pay our respects to the sect master and madam." Elder Fa Ming spat out the mouthful of tea that had just reached his mouth, spilling it all over his clothes. However, he did not have time to care about this at this time. Instead, He looked at Gu Xingyin with an indescribable expression, as if he wanted to confirm if he was hallucinating. Unfortunately, these words were indeed spoken by Gu Xingyin. Elder Fa Ming was not the only one who heard it. The disciples behind him also heard it clearly. Jiyu looked up at the dazed disciples of the White Firmament Immortal sect, and glanced at Gu Xingyin with a half-smile. How could he not see that she was doing it on purpose? Gu Xingyin smiled back at him. Thus, in the eyes of the disciples of the White Firmament Immortal sect, the interaction between the two became a blatant flirting in front of everyone. Although they were surprised, many of the disciples looked at the Demon Emperor Bai Yin's countenance, and felt a little envious of senior brother He. Elder Fa Ming finally calmed himself down, and placed the cracked white jade cup on the table beside him. He turned to look at Ji Yu, who had been silent all this time. Martial nephew He Qianglu was famous for being aloof and arrogant when he was in the White Heaven Immortal sect. In addition, he was extremely talented and was personally taught by his father. Since he was young, he did not hang out with his fellow disciples in the sect, so everyone accepted his taciturn persona. At this time, Elder Fa Ming also had many doubts in his heart, which was why he wanted to confirm with him. Ji Yu tilted her head and nodded at Elder Fa Ming. Sitting upright in her seat, she was as handsome as a jade carving. Ayin is right. She and I are in love with each other. I won't marry anyone else in this life. An extremely faint smile appeared on Ji Yu's face. Then, under Elder Fa Ming's somewhat doubtful gaze, she said softly, "Thank you for your concern, Uncle Fa Ming. In a few days, Qianglu will naturally bring Ayin to visit my parents." When he said this, he also revealed a spiritual power that belonged to the disciples of the White Heaven Immortal sect to prove to Dharma name that he was indeed He Qianglu and not someone else who had been swapped or possessed. Therefore, a group of disciples of the White Heaven Celestial sect led by Elder Fa Ming came to the Demon Emperor Palace in a mighty and murderous manner. After eating a tasteless meal, they were politely sent off from the Demon Emperor Mountain in a daze. After the group of people left, Gu Xingyin finally could not hold back her laughter. She lay on the throne and laughed out loud. Ji Yu looked at her helplessly and indulgently. Was it fun? Gu Xingyin nodded. Of course it was fun. Although she had experienced countless worlds, this was the first time she did not have to care about her persona at all. She did not have to care about anything and did not have to care about anything. She could do whatever she wanted. This feeling was simply too great. Chapter 21:16. Seeing her excited expression, Ji Yu also thought of something. He couldn't help but feel a slight heartache as he pulled her into his arms. It's been hard on you during those days. Gu Xingyin relaxed and leaned into his embrace. What's hard on you? I didn't even dare to think about the days I have now. What he and she had hoped for was just the two of them being together forever. Now their biggest wish had been realized. What were the hardships in the past that couldn't even be considered hardships? Ever since the disciples of the White Heaven Immortal sect left the Demon Emperor Mountain, a rumor quickly spread throughout the entire cultivation world. The demon race's Demon Emperor Bai Yin and the cultivation world's #1 handsome man, He Qianglu, were together. What a joke! At first, when most people heard this, they snorted disdainfully. The difference between this pair was really too great. Who was He Qianglu? He was like a cold moon and a clear lake. That kind of plain-clothed elegance was peerless and unparalleled. Many people who admired him felt that it was blasphemy to even look at him. Who was Demon Emperor Bai Yin? Everyone knew about the demon race's heaven-devouring python bloodline. The heaven-devouring python had always been a race with exuberant desires. There were hundreds of people serving the demon empress in her palace. If you said that the demon emperor coveted young Master He's beauty, people would still believe you. You said that these two people who didn't seem to be together were together? This was the biggest joke of the year. However, if one person said this, others could still take it as a joke. But what if 10 people, 100 people all said the same thing? Thus, in the end, everyone had no choice but to believe this fact. That was the unblasphemous young master He Qianglu and the seductive and deadly Dark Knight Poppy Demon Emperor Bai Yin were together. When the news spread to the White Heaven Immortal sect, He Qianglu's fans were shocked. The entire White Heaven Immortal sect style was like this. Impossible. My senior brother, he is like an immortal. How could he be with a demon? It must be that the demon emperor coveted senior brother he's beauty and used some demonic technique to confuse my senior brother he's mind. Sigh, if I knew this would happen, I would have been braver and told senior brother my feelings. And the style of the entire demon emperor mountain was like this. It is said that Her Majesty Demon Emperor and that young master, he have not left the main hall for 7 days and 7 nights. What about the others? I heard that young master his appearance is peerless. Her Majesty took a liking to him at first glance and couldn't tolerate anyone else? I still wanted to recommend myself to His Majesty the Demon Emperor to have a short-lived marriage. Looks like it's not going to happen, Sai. Just look at yourself in the mirror. Do you think Her Majesty will take a liking to you with your coarse skin and thick flesh? Gu Xingyin immediately released the handsome men that the Baiyin Demon Emperor had captured. She even cast a spell to make them forget about the incident. And from that day onwards, no matter what happened, even if it was an important meeting of the demon race, Gu Xingyin would bring her lover with her, perfectly portraying the image of a demon emperor who had fallen into the web of love. The entire demon race knew that His Majesty had fallen for her this time. As a result, the demons who originally looked down on He Qianglu also started to treat him seriously. After putting on an act, Gu Xingyin prepared to make a trip to the White Heaven Immortal sect with He Qianglu. In any case, they were the parents of Ji Yu's current body. No matter what, they should pay them a visit and settle the karma. Almost late. Using all my strength, I'm begging for a wave of monthly votes. Monthly votes, monthly votes, monthly votes. Right, I haven't recommended a book for a long time. Today, I'm seriously recommending a novel, Peerless Black-Bellied. The Hedonistic Princess Goes Against the Heavens. Yes, that's right, it's Gao Lingji's debut novel. Although Gao Lingji wasn't this tall and cold back then, the first book is indeed my true love. Those who are lacking in books can go take a look, but the first book, cough cough cough, you have to be mentally prepared. Chapter 21:17. When the sect master and his wife of the White Heaven Immortal sect received the letter from the demons, they were shocked and devastated. Their youngest son had just gone out to travel. How did he get into trouble? At first, they heard that the demons had taken a liking to their youngest son for his beauty, and had taken him back to be their pet. How could this be? The sect master of the White Heaven Immortal sect had made all kinds of preparations. Elder Fa Ming and the others were just going to investigate the truth of this news. If it was true, the tens of thousands of sword immortals of the White Heaven Immortal sect would be on standby to flatten the Demon Emperor Mountain. However, the news that Elder Fa Ming brought back, the sect master of the White Heaven Immortal sect looked at the letter in his hand and did not know what expression to make. His youngest son had not been taken back because of his good looks, but because he had taken a liking to the leader of the demons and they were in love. The most ridiculous thing was that the demon emperor had said that she would visit with his son tomorrow. Senior brother, the reputation of the heaven-devouring Python clan. The sect master's wife, who was standing on the other side, was clearly worried. Before the sect master's wife and the sect master became Dao companions, they were fellow disciples under the same master. They were already used to calling each other that even after so many years of being Dao companions, they had not changed it. The sect master's wife was a gentle woman. Strictly speaking, there was no such thing as those of different races must have different hearts in this world. The cultivation world did not feel superior either. She did not mind her son falling in love with a demon. As long as he was happy, as a parent, she would not interfere too much. The key was He Qianglu like Demon Emperor Baiying. The bloodline of the heaven-devouring Python clan did not have a good reputation. Of course, the current Demon Emperor was said to have just reached adulthood, so there were no rumors of him being a woman yet. However, there were other clansmen of the heaven-devouring Python clan, as well as the collateral clansmen. This clan was famous for being lustful and lustful. It was said that her son had been taken away when he met the Demon Emperor. Of course, this was only a rumor and no one knew whether it was true or not. Those who knew the truth had their memories erased. As a mother, the sect master's wife naturally did not want her son to find such a Dao companion. Seeing his Dao companion's expression, The sect master patted her hand and said softly, "Junior sister, don't be too worried. I believe in our Jade Pavilion's judgment. No matter what, let's see the situation tomorrow." The sect master's wife nodded. The next day, the disciples of the White Firmament Immortal sect, who were keen on going out to train, level up, and do missions to earn spirit stones, all chose to stay in the sect. You ask why? Of course, it was because he had heard that the Demon Emperor was coming to visit the Immortal sect. If it was just a simple friendship between the two clans, there would probably be a large number of cultivation maniacs who would not take it seriously. After all, the Demon Emperor's status was there, and the people he wanted to meet were big shots like the sect masters and elders. He had nothing to do with ordinary disciples. But it was different this time. All kinds of rumors had already spread in the Immortal sect. He said that the Demon Empress had come to the White Firmament Immortal sect not as the Demon Empress, but as the future daughter-in-law. This was a huge matter, regardless of whether or not one had a gossipy heart. In a situation where the entire Immortal sect was discussing this matter, no matter how pure one's heart was, they would still be curious. Just what kind of appearance did the Demon Emperor have that could move senior brother He Qianglu's heart? Thus, on this day, many meticulously dressed female disciples suddenly appeared in the White Sky Immortal sect. Chapter 21:18. The thoughts of these female disciples were actually very easy to understand. The female disciples who already had a good impression of the Immortal sect's high and mighty, He Qianglu didn't need to say anything. The other female disciples also had the mentality that they absolutely couldn't lose face in front of outsiders. Why? In the entire White Heaven Immortal sect, there were tens of thousands of cultivator disciples. The number of female disciples was small, but there were still 3,000. Within the White Heaven Immortal sect, there were many fairies and beauties with different temperaments. However, He Qianglu, who was known as the sect's #1 young master, didn't take a fancy to any of them. Instead, he fell in love with a demon. The beauties who usually schemed against each other and didn't see eye to eye with each other maintained a rare front at this time. Usually, I really don't see eye to eye with you, and I also know that you definitely don't have a good impression of me either. But now, with an external enemy in front of us, we're all disciples of the White Heaven Immortal sect. We can't let an outsider steal the limelight. The female disciples who also had similar thoughts naturally concurred with each other and immediately struck a deal. At the main gate of the White Heaven Immortal sect, on a small rockery to the left, a beauty in red was sitting with her knees bent. She didn't seem to be dressed up like many female cultivators. She only wore a flame-like red dress, and her hair was tied up high with a jade crown. However, this simple attire made most of the male disciples unable to take their eyes off her. That's senior sister Tsai. Some people whispered in the distance. Everyone knew that the sect master's third and only female disciple, Chung Tsai, had always had a good impression of her junior brother, He Qianglu. Chung Tsai was talented, had a noble status, and was exquisitely beautiful. She could be considered the most outstanding among He Qianglu's many admirers. She was a straightforward person. She had even stopped He Qianglu in front of everyone to express her feelings. However, in the past, He Qianglu didn't have any thoughts about the matters between men and women. He was also very respectful to this senior sister of his, and had no romantic feelings. A normal confession could be considered to have ended without a cause. Why would Chung Tsai, who had always been a cultivation maniac, appear here today? The reason was obvious even if one used their toes to think. They're coming, they're coming. Some of the disciples with sharp eyes noticed the movement in front of them. 8 gigantic luan birds with elegant figures, gorgeous feathers, and long, gorgeous tails flew down from the sky. Behind the luan was a huge chariot that flickered with a dazzling light. The luan bird, which possessed a trace of the phoenix bloodline, and was considered to have a noble status in the demon clan, was willing to be the carriage. In the entire world, there was no one else who could use such a formation other than the Emperor of Demons. Everyone was amazed by the Demon Emperor's generosity, and the curiosity in their hearts grew even stronger. It was said that the Demon Emperor by Ing was a peerless beauty that made people forget what day it was with a single glance. It was unknown if the rumors were exaggerated, or if there really was such a beauty in this world. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, they saw an elegant and fair hand lift the soft and ethereal silk curtain in front of the chariot. Then a person with a cold and outstanding temperament walked out, just like the moonlight. It was He Cheong Tower. Everyone. Senior apprentice brother He and the Demon Emperor are actually riding in the same carriage. The rumors are true. The two of them are in love with each other. This reality is too torturous. I refuse to accept it. Jiyu didn't turn around to look at the others. After he got off the carriage, he only focused on the inside of the carriage. He leaned over and reached out his hand, personally lifting the curtains for the people inside. Chapter 21:19. His actions caused many people to widen their eyes in shock. No one knew better than the disciples of the White Heaven Immortal sect how reclusive and arrogant He Qianglu was. However, such a person would one day be willing to bend down and lift the curtain for another person. How deep was his love for her to be willing to put down his status and do this for a person? Chung Tsai, who had been sitting on the rockery, trembled. She came here today with a trace of unwillingness in her heart. She wanted to see what the Demon Emperor, who was rumored to have moved her junior brother, looked like and how charming she was. Even if she lost, she, Chung Tsai, wanted to know why she had lost. However, after seeing He Qianglu bend down, Chung Tsai knew that all of this was meaningless. A person like junior brother, was willing to do such a thing for a woman. Then, even if the Demon Emperor's appearance was nothing, even if the Demon Emperor was inferior to her in every aspect, so what? She had already suffered a crushing defeat. Chung Tsai only felt empty in her heart. She suddenly felt that her actions today were really stupid. Everything in front of her became dull and dull. She was about to leave when she suddenly heard a few suppressed cries of surprise. What was going on? She looked in the direction of the sound, and her gaze froze in an instant. It turned out that a pair of jade-like white and soft hands were placed on He Qianglu's hands. Then, half of her body poked out of the carriage. There were originally 8 gorgeous luan birds standing quietly in front of the carriage. However, the moment the figure walked out of the carriage, the 8 luan birds completely turned into a black and white background, without any sense of existence. Her beauty overshadowed the crowd, nothing more than that. The woman who should be the Demon Emperor was wearing a pure gold robe. Her black hair was tied up in a high bun and secured with an 8-treasure golden crown. Originally, she was dressed to steal the limelight of the host, but it was forcibly suppressed by her beauty and noble aura, causing people to be in a state of panic and unable to look at her directly. However, the moment this majestic, noble, and beautiful empress looked at the white-clothed man beside her, all of her majesty turned into a look of love. Even the corners of her eyes and the tips of her brows revealed a charm that only belonged to a happy woman. She extended her hand in front of He Qianglu. Then everyone saw that senior brother He, who had always been expressionless and aloof, actually broke into a smile. Although this smile was very light, no one could ignore the joy in his expression. Then he used his fingers to push open the woman's hand bit by bit. Their palms were crossed and their fingers were interlocked. The two of them didn't even pay attention to the surrounding immortal sect disciples who were secretly sizing them up. They only nodded at the white firmament immortal sect's elder, who had come to greet them. Just like that, the two of them held hands and walked forward as if there was no one else around. Even though this Demon Emperor and He Qianglu hadn't said a single word from beginning to end, the intimacy between the two, the tacit understanding and affection between their eyes, had already completely revealed what deep affection was. Everyone. I feel an urge to raise a torch in my heart. The other party clearly didn't do anything, but I feel like I've been cruelly shown off. It wasn't until the incomparably compatible figures disappeared that everyone seemed to wake up from a dream and came back to their senses. Chapter 21:20. In this world, there really is such a gorgeous person. A disciple was still in a trance as he sighed. The key was that she had such a gorgeous appearance, but her temperament was noble and pure, making it impossible for anyone to have any thoughts of disrespecting her. Another colleague standing next to him heard this and said, "Isn't that so?" When the Demon Emperor walked out, I felt like my heart was about to jump out. Unlike the male disciples who were beaming with joy, the female disciples who had dressed up meticulously just to come here felt very complicated. They originally wanted to dress up and show the demon emperor the beauty of the female disciples of the White Heaven Immortal sect. However, at this moment, they were very glad that no one dared to provoke her. Otherwise, it would be too embarrassing. Her Majesty the Demon Emperor alone was enough to make all of them understand that there was no harm if there was no comparison. Under normal circumstances, these female disciples would probably be jealous of him. Not only did this woman steal the most talented, good-looking, and outstanding senior brother from their sect, but she also looked like she had cheats. Only a mediocre person wouldn't be jealous. However, the key point was that jealousy usually only appeared between people with similar conditions, or who could see the difference between them. After witnessing the demon emperor's stunning beauty and how their senior brother cherished her, these female disciples helplessly discovered that they couldn't even bring themselves to be jealous. The gap was too big. It felt like there was no way to reach her level even if they worked hard for a lifetime. What was the use of jealousy other than making themselves unhappy? Chung Tsai listened with a wooden face as her junior brothers and sisters discussed the scene she had just seen. After a long time, she sighed softly. She lowered her head and saw a small green stone tied to her waist. After muttering to himself for a while, he finally exerted some strength in his hand and pulled it off. After looking at it for a long time, she finally closed her eyes as if she had made a decision. She raised her hand and threw the green stone into the pool behind the rockery. She got up, landed on the ground, and left without looking back. That blue stone was a congratulatory gift from He Qianglu, who was Chung Tsai's junior brother, when she was 20 years old. It was said that it was an extremely precious spirit-gathering stone, which was extremely beneficial to one's daily cultivation. She didn't value this stone because of its effects in the first place. Now that she had made her decision, it was better not to keep this thing any longer. The news of Gu Xingyin and He Qianglu's arrival had already reached the ears of the sect master and his wife when they were still at the entrance of the White Heaven Immortal sect. When the sect leader of the White Heaven Celestial sect heard that the demon emperor was riding a chariot pulled by an 8-headed Luan bird, and he did not bring anyone else with him except for his maidservants, he knew what was going on. The magnificence of the chariot was a display of one's status, not allowing others to look down on it. Furthermore, she had only brought her maids and no guards. This was a clear indication of her sincerity. She had not come here as a demon emperor, but as He Qianglu's lover. Before they even met, the sect master and his wife already had a good impression of Gu Xingyin. However, no matter how sincere they were, the other party was still the leader of the demon race. The sect master and his wife did not greet the demon emperor at the entrance. Instead, they personally went to the entrance of the White Heaven Celestial sect's main hall. Today's update is complete. My monthly votes have yet to surpass the first place, but I've already been beaten by the big shot behind me. I'm on the verge of collapse. I'm struggling on my deathbed. Those with monthly votes, please give it a shot. Chapter 21-21. As the #1 sect in the cultivation world, the White Heaven Immortal sect occupied a vast area. In order to show their sincerity, Gu Xingyin deliberately chose to walk over with Jiyu. Of course, they made a public display of affection along the way. Hearing the report of where senior brother He and the demon emperor were, the sect master and his wife could not help but feel nervous and expectant. Fortunately, Gu Xingyin and Jiyu did not walk to the main hall at the speed of mortals. In less than 10 minutes, they appeared in front of the sect master and his wife, as well as the elders of the White Heaven Immortal sect, who were waiting at the entrance of the main hall. The sect master of the White Heaven Immortal sect immediately saw his son, who was still as handsome as ever. After looking him up and down to make sure that everything was fine, his gaze landed on the demon emperor, who was glowing like a human. His eyes could not help but flash when he looked at her. She was indeed very beautiful. This demon emperor's appearance and temperament were so gorgeous and powerful that they were extremely invasive. Father, mother. Ji walked in front of the two of them and called out very naturally. She did not bow. The sect master and his wife were a little puzzled by their son's behavior today. He Qionglu's personality was usually described as proud and aloof, as well as meticulous. Even when he met his parents on a daily basis, he still had to bow. Today, their son Jiyu sensed their gazes and was unmoved. He showed an admiring smile on his face and lamented, "Some time ago, something went wrong during my cultivation. I thought I wouldn't live for long. At the moment of life and death, the thing I regret the most is not being close to my parents." That was just an excuse for him to make up. In the past, when his clone descended to the lower realm and did not have any memories, it could be considered a proper reincarnation. Now his clone had truly descended to the lower realm. It was not a big deal for him to bow, but he had to see if the sect leader of the White Heaven Immortal sect and his wife could take it. If such an ordinary cultivator accepted his Chaos Green Lotus's bow, their lifespan would be shortened at best, and they would be struck by lightning at worst. The sect master and his wife were completely unaware that their son's core had changed. When they heard Jiyu's words, they were extremely worried. The sect master's wife even reached out to grab his hand and probed it with her spiritual energy. Jiyu did not resist. It was true that he Qionglu had been injured. It was just that he had healed him afterwards. He found out that his son's body was fine, and his spiritual energy was flowing smoothly, even more vigorous than before. The sect mistress was finally relieved. The couple realized that they had completely forgotten to entertain today's important guest. Sect Master White Heaven quickly smiled and pretended not to see that Gu Xingyin was still holding his son's hand tightly. He said apologetically, "Seeing my son, who has not returned for a long time, I am overjoyed. I hope that the Demon Emperor will forgive me for neglecting you." Of course, Gu Xingyin did not blame him. She chuckled softly, and the elders of the White Heaven Immortal sect felt as if they had seen thousands of flowers blooming. Then the Demon Emperor said, "Senior, you are being too courteous. The one who has come today is not a Demon Emperor. She is merely a woman by Yin." Her words could be said to be quite clear. In other words, I'm not here to represent the demon race. I'm here as your son's girlfriend. Chapter 21-22. Hearing Gu Xingyin's reply and the way she addressed them as seniors, the White Heaven sect master and his wife had mixed feelings. However, in terms of age and experience, it was not too much for this demon emperor, who was said to have just reached adulthood, to address them as seniors. What could they do? When they heard that their son had brought back someone he liked, they did not intend to embarrass the girl and break them up. So, the group began to enter the main hall. After all, no matter how modest Gu Xingyin's words were, with the other party's status, this welcoming banquet was still quite grand. It was the kind of grand that was important enough, but not at all intimate. This was the most polite way to do it. However, after seeing the interaction between their son and this demon emperor, the White Heaven sect master and his wife felt that they might have made a mistake. Although there were so many outsiders, their behavior could be said to be much more restrained. However, the son who would smile gently at his sweetheart, personally pour wine for her, put food in her bowl, and calmly eat the food she put in his bowl. Was this really their otherworldly son? There were many elders in the main hall. Yes, there were also many elders who had been single for thousands of years. They were all blinded by this pair of young people. To be honest, they didn't quite understand either. This young couple didn't go overboard at all. They just looked at each other and smiled. Occasionally, one of them would pour a cup of wine for the other, and the other would peel a spirit fruit for the other. It was not as if they had never seen behavior that was much more out of line. But the strange thing was that this was clearly a very common behavior between Dao companions, yet it seemed to be shrouded in a harmonious atmosphere between the two of them, causing others to feel that there was no other existence that could intrude between the two of them. They must be very loving and happy. Everyone in the hall who saw this scene had the same thought in their hearts, including the White Heaven sect master and his wife. The husband and wife looked at each other and saw the emotions in each other's eyes. When the banquet was over, Jiyu brought Gu Xingyin to the White Heaven Peak where her parents lived. The White Heaven sect master and his wife seemed to know that the two of them would come and waited there. No one knew what they talked about at the White Heaven Peak. They only knew that the Demon Emperor Bai Yin actually stayed at the White Heaven Immortal sect. After more than half a month, Gu Xingyin returned to the Demon Emperor Mountain, while Jiyu stayed. At the same time, a piece of news came from the White Heaven Peak. In 3 months He Qianglü would marry the Demon Emperor Bai Yin at the White Heaven Immortal Sect. When the news came out, there was an uproar. No one expected that the White Heaven Immortal Sect's attitude would be so straightforward. They agreed just like that? What happened to those storybooks that said that humans and demons had different paths, and that their love was so deep that they hovered between life and death? It's a lie. How could there be so much drama in reality? The couple from the White Heaven Immortal Sect were open-minded. From the looks of it, their son and His Majesty the Demon Emperor were indeed in love with each other. Both of them were sincere, and had the intention of spending the rest of their lives together. Since that was the case, why did the couple have to do something so immoral like breaking up a pair of mandarin ducks? Of course, there was another reason why they agreed so quickly, and that was that Gu Xingyin swore a heavenly Tao oath in front of them. She would only love He Qianglü in this life. If she violated it, she would be struck by tribulation lightning and not even her bones would be left. To the demon clan, the tribulation lightning that came once every 1,000 years was the most terrifying thing in the world. Such a heavenly Tao oath could be said to be quite decisive. Chapter 21-23. He Qianglü followed closely behind Gu Xingyin, and made a similar oath in front of his parents. The sect master and his wife of the White Heaven Immortal Sect had no objections. What else could they say when things had already turned out this way? Not to mention that this future daughter-in-law, other than her demonic bloodline, had nothing to criticize about her in other aspects. In terms of appearance, it was hard to find 1 or 2 people in the cultivation world who could stand next to his immortal-like son and not be inferior to him. In terms of status, the Demon Emperor was one of the most respected beings in the cultivation world. In fact, between the two of them, their son was the one who was out of their league. Cough. Of course, in the eyes of all parents, their own children were the best. The only thing that could be talked about was the bloodline of the heaven-devouring python. This ancient beast bloodline was naturally top-notch in terms of combat strength. Whether it was as an emperor or as a warrior, it was perfect. Only as a lover, it might not be too reliable. In the history of the demon emperors, there were very few who were faithful. For example, the previous demon emperor, Bai Yin Demon Emperor, also suddenly came to a realization after giving birth to his daughter. He actually brought the demon empress to travel the cultivation world. This was also the only thing that worried the sect master and his wife as parents. However, since Bai Yin Demon Emperor was willing to make such a heavenly oath, their son obviously believed in it, and was willing to bear witness with her. Although they were parents, they were still outsiders to the relationship between the two of them. What was there to say? Therefore, when outsiders asked directly or indirectly, the sect master and his wife looked very satisfied with this daughter-in-law. They successfully made those who wanted to gossip, whether with good or bad intentions, speechless. Letting their son get married at the White Heaven Peak was the sect master and his wife's only wish. Their son marrying the wife he liked at the place where he grew up was also something that parents were very happy to see. This was also the only request they made of Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin readily agreed. It made no difference to her where the wedding was held. Most importantly, no matter where the wedding took place, He Qianglü would definitely have to follow her back to the Demon Imperial Palace. It was impossible for the Demon Emperor to live with her husband in the White Heaven Immortal Sect. Even if the Demon Emperor was willing to put down her status, the entire White Heaven Immortal Sect would probably feel uneasy, right? Since that was the case, He Qianglü would most likely follow Gu Xingyin to the Demon Emperor Mountain after the wedding. He was already hers, so what did it matter if she took a step back in this situation? Soon, the day of the wedding arrived. After all, it was the marriage of the son of the sect master of the White Heaven Immortal Sect, the #1 sect in the cultivation world. Moreover, the marriage partner was the Demon Emperor. This news had shaken the entire cultivation world. On this day, almost all of the top experts in the cultivation world came in person. Naturally, the demon race would not show any weakness. Not only were the 8 royal races of the demon race present, even the long-missing former Demon Emperor and Demon Empress actually appeared at the celebration. It could be said to be the grandest wedding in the cultivation world in the past 1,000 years. However, no matter how grand the occasion was or how distinguished the guests were, it had nothing to do with Gu Xingyin and Jiyu. From the beginning to the end, they only cared about the person beside them. Chapter 21-24. Speaking of which, in this wedding that had cost countless manpower, resources, and money, the thing that the guests were most interested in talking about was the appearance of the newlyweds. Many people who hadn't seen He Qianglü and Bai Yin's faces were greatly shocked when they saw this newlyweds with their sky-high appearance. In the past, most cultivators thought that the demon emperor must have coveted the appearance of the most handsome man in the cultivation world, and used some tricks to win the beauty. But after seeing the demon emperor in person, who was the one who won the beauty? With this demon emperor's appearance, what tricks did he need to use? Any man wouldn't be able to control himself, alright? All in all, this wedding in the cultivation world improved demon emperor Bai Yin's reputation in the cultivation world a lot. It could be seen that appearance was everything. It worked in any world. Less than half a month after the wedding, Jiyu returned to Demon Emperor Mountain with Gu Xingyin. You can all leave. Gu Xingyin waved her hand and dismissed the maids in the hall. The maids left the hall respectfully and closed the door of the bedroom. As soon as they stepped out of the door, their gentle and respectful expressions instantly became clear. How long do you think His Majesty will take this time? I'm guessing 3 days. How is that possible? His Majesty and His Majesty the Demon Emperor take a few days each time. It's definitely more than 3 days. Why don't we make a bet? Let's bet. Demon Emperor was the demon race's respectful title for He Qianglü. Jiyu was at the back of the hall. Gu Xingyin was about to go over when she heard the maid's conversation. Gu Xingyin. She knew that the demons were straightforward and open, but was it really appropriate to discuss His Majesty the Demon Emperor's bed so openly? She smiled and didn't say anything in the end. She walked toward the back of the hall. Jiyu was putting something into the incense burner. Gu Xingyin focused and sniffed it. It was a very light lotus fragrance. You made it yourself? Jiyu nodded. When I left this time, I tried to bring some things with me. He stretched out his hand, and a perfectly shaped white lotus appeared in his palm. As soon as the white lotus appeared, the spirit qi in the entire hall suddenly shook. Gu Xingyin recognized it. It was the only plant that could be stored in the small world, and it was also the reason why there were millions of them. Jiyu only needed a single thought to regenerate them. However, in this small world, this lotus was already an extremely rare treasure. Gu Xingyin instantly understood that this incense was most likely made from lotus flowers. She suddenly recalled that she had patted Jiyu's back with a smile just now. In an instant, the voices of the maids outside the hall entered their ears. A clear female voice said with a worried tone, "Do you think our demon lord's body can satisfy His Majesty? Why don't we cook more spirit food that can replenish blood and qi next time?" Gu Xingyin. This was very awkward. She raised her head and happened to meet Jiyu's gaze, which seemed to be smiling yet not smiling. Jiyu put away the lotus in his hand and pulled Gu Xingyin into his arms. "I can't satisfy you, Gu Xingyin explained with difficulty. "I didn't mean that." Jiyu raised his eyebrows. "Then why did you deliberately let me hear this?" His palm was about to slide down Gu Xingyin's back to her waist. He pressed lightly twice. "Or are you reminding me to do something?" Gu Xingyin. How could she get away with her own death? Urgent. Waiting online. Chapter 21-25. However, before she could say anything, her lips, tongue, and breathing had already been completely invaded by the other party. Gu Xingyin clearly knew that she had no way to resist this man. Just like how the other party desired her, she also had an extremely deep desire for him. White smoke rose in spirals from the green jade incense burner, brushing past the trembling curtains, imprinting faintly on the brocade quilt, and finally dissipating in the sweet air. It was rather quiet in the sleeping chamber, and no one dared to disturb her. Gu Xingyin's glued eyelids trembled a few times, and finally opened unwillingly, looking at the exquisite embroidery on the gauze canopy inside the large bed in the sleeping chamber. Her body was unusually sore, and there was a kind of exhaustion as if all the energy in her body had been emptied. Thinking of the nonsense these days, even though Gu Xingyin and Jiyu had been together for so many years, her face still blushed. It was too absurd. A warm force came from her waist, and behind her was a man's possessive embrace. Gu Xingyin didn't like this position, so she lazily turned around. The two of them were facing each other, and then she met Jiyu's smiling eyes. "You're awake." Gu Xingyin grunted, and couldn't help but reach out a hand to wrap around Jiyu's body, sending herself into his embrace. Jiyu enjoyed his lover's intimacy and dependence on him very much. He looked at Gu Xingyin's slightly closed eyes and the tiredness that was difficult to hide, and knew that his lack of self-control had tired her out. He lowered his head, and gently kissed her eyelids. "Sleep a little more?" Her lover's embrace was too comfortable, and this kiss was too gentle. Gu Xingyin almost didn't resist, and instantly sank into a dark and sweet dreamland. When she woke up again, it was already the next day. Fortunately, her symbolic meaning as the demon emperor was greater than her actual meaning, so she didn't need to do everything herself. Otherwise, He Qianglou would probably have to bear the title of the demon emperor of the Calamity clan. Time passed very quickly, and in the blink of an eye, Jiyu and Gu Xingyin had already lived in the Demon Emperor Mountain for several years. On this day, Jiyu, who was eating with Gu Xingyin, suddenly had a change in expression. Gu Xingyin heard the sound transmission that there was something going on in the small world, and he had to go back. Gu Xingyin looked at his expression. Jiyu understood her meaning and shook his head. "It's no big deal, I can do it alone. You stay here." Since he said so, Gu Xingyin naturally believed him, and did not say anything else. To the outside world, Gu Xingyin announced that the demon lord had sensed something, and was going into seclusion for a period of time. The days didn't seem to be any different from before. However, on this day, just as Gu Xingyin was about to take a bath and change his clothes, his expression suddenly froze. The one who came in with a tray wasn't one of the maids who usually served her. The man who came in was wearing a snow-white undergarment, and he didn't wear any shoes. The long hair that fell to his waist was only loosely tied up with a silver-white ribbon. Looking at his appearance carefully, it was actually a rare and elegant handsome face. His peach blossom eyes were clear and cold, and he was a rare handsome gentleman. Gu Xingyin frowned. She said coldly, "Where are Qi Ji and Bai Ji?" These were the names of the two maids in her palace. The man smiled gently, and came forward with the tray. He said softly, "How can the two sisters compare to you? Lose understanding?" Chapter 21-26. Before he could finish speaking, his entire body was suddenly hit by a huge force, and he flew out, crashing heavily onto the ground. "Your Majesty!" The man who called himself Yu Lu raised his pale face, and looked at Gu Xingyin in disbelief. Gu Xingyin looked at him with killing intent. Are you qualified to be called Yu Lu?" How could she not see this man's purpose? He probably heard the news of Ji Yu's closed-door cultivation, and came to climb her bed. Seeing Gu Xingyin's appearance, the man did not give up, and only looked at her in a daze. "Your Majesty, Yu Lu knows that my status is low, and I don't dare to fight with the demon lord. I only ask." When he said this, a trace of red appeared on his pale face, and that cold face seemed to be dyed with a touch of beauty. "I only ask that your Majesty can see Yu Lu's sincerity, and allow Yu Lu to stay by your side." Logically speaking, if such a beauty was really the previous empress of a white marriage, even if she could see that this person was deliberately seducing her, she would still gladly accept him. In any case, it was just an extra toy. But the person who had taken over this body was Gu Xingyin. She only looked coldly at the man on the ground, as if she saw something dirty. "Are you worthy of being mentioned in the same breath as the demon lord?" Yu Lu's eyes widened. He was only an ordinary member of the tens of thousands of demons in the Demon Emperor Mountain. His bloodline was not noble, and he did not have an outstanding family background. The only thing he could take out was his face. He had heard countless times that the Demon Emperor and the Demon Lord had a deep relationship, and that the Demon Emperor had even kept himself pure for the Demon Lord, and had never touched anyone else. Yu Lu had once seen the Demon Lord from afar, and only felt that He and the demon lord were somewhat similar in terms of temperament and appearance. Some unspeakable delusions arose just like this. This time, he finally heard that the demon lord was in closed-door cultivation, and the demon emperor had already stayed alone in the demon emperor palace for several days. He knew a little about the habits of the heaven-devouring python's bloodline. He purposely dressed himself up so that he looked more similar to the demon monarch. He firmly believed that under such circumstances, the demon monarch would definitely not reject such a handsome demon who looked similar to the demon monarch if he volunteered to sleep with the demon monarch. He had planned for several days, and even paid with his own body to the demon clan guard captain of the demon king's palace, so that he would let him pass. At a certain point in time, he had sent away a few of the demon king's majesty's personal maids, and successfully sneaked into the demon king's palace that he had never entered before. However, no matter how much he thought about it, what he didn't expect was that he had already prepared everything and had already successfully infiltrated. Yet His Majesty the Demon Emperor looked down on him. Such a demon emperor was quite different from the heaven-devouring python in the legends. He stared blankly at Gu Xingyin's alluring face and was somewhat puzzled. But he didn't have the chance to figure it out. A sharp pain came from his dantian. His yaokor. Get over here. Gu Xingyin's thoughts moved, and the violent anger had already reached the ears of the demons near the Demon King's palace. The palace guard captain and a few maids ran in shock, and knelt down in front of the demon emperor's rage. Seeing the man in white lying on the ground, their faces all turned pale. Gu Xingyin didn't even look at them, and only said, Bai Ji and Qi Ji left their posts without permission. Guard captain, had an affair with an outsider. Each of you go to the punishment hall to receive your punishment. Hearing the two words punishment hall, their faces were already pale, but they didn't dare to say anything. They just lowered their heads and dragged the body on the ground out. Today Kawenka became a dog, and his mind was blank. This author was probably useless. Only 2 updates ==. Chapter 21-27. Gu Xingyin watched them leave coldly. When they reached the punishment hall, someone would naturally make them speak and tell the truth about what they had done and what they had overlooked. Ever since she had taken over this body, she had never lost her temper before. But now, she had to show all the demons that the Baiyin Demon King had not changed her mind. She had not lost her temper only because she had not encountered anything that could infuriate her. And what this demon called Yulu had done today had clearly crossed her bottom line. Even though this was not her real body, Gu Xingyin was not willing to let her lover suffer any grievances. She wanted everyone to know that Demon Lord He Qianglue was the Demon King's reverse scale, and anyone who touched it would die. The Demon King's palace had a new guard captain, and the Demon King's personal maidservants had rested for half a month before returning to the palace. It was just that they had become even more cautious. The previous peaceful days had made them let down their guard. Now that they had learned their lesson, they naturally did not dare to make any mistakes. And this time, His Majesty the Demon King's closed-door cultivation had made all the demons realize the importance of His Majesty the Demon King. Given the nature of the heaven-devouring python's bloodline, His Majesty the Demon King had not summoned any demons during the 2 years that His Majesty the Demon King had been in closed-door cultivation. It could be said to be a very inconceivable thing. After all, it was the nature of the Snake Clan. Once they had sex, the bloodline power would surge continuously in their bodies. Abstaining from sex for 2 years was an extremely torturous punishment. But His Majesty the Demon King had done it. From then on, those demons who harbored some inexplicable thoughts about the Demon King had completely given up. No demon dared to belittle His Majesty the Demon King ever again. Actually, these demons had thought too much. The heaven-devouring python's bloodline was not bad, and the average member had no way of suppressing it. To control it, one had to rely on strong willpower. But Gu Xingyin was not like that. Her strength was strong enough to suppress the impulses in this body, and it was not as unbearable as the rumors said. The joy between her and her lover was completely based on lust. How could someone as powerful as Jiyu and Gu Xingyin allow themselves to be controlled by mere physical desires? Gu Xingyin had also heard some of the rumors that were going around today. However, she did not stop it, nor did she clarify it. This kind of rumor would not affect him at all. Instead, it would make the demons fear the demon lord even more. Since that's the case, let them be. Gu Xingyin, who was meditating cross-legged in the main hall, suddenly had a change of expression. Before she opened her eyes, she felt herself falling into a familiar and warm embrace. Is it over? She relaxed in his arms and opened her eyes to look at the man she hadn't seen for a long time. Sorry to keep you waiting. Jiyu felt somewhat guilty. To him, it was just a trip back to the small world to retrieve some things. And it took less than the time to brew a cup of tea. But to this world, it was probably 1 or 2 years. Let me show you something. He smiled and pulled Gu Xingyin up. He raised his hand and set up a boundary. The purpose of this boundary was not to prevent others from spying on them, but to sense the laws of this world. Jiyu smiled and stretched out his hand. A white lotus flower bloomed in his palm. Chapter 21-28. Gu Xingyin stared at it with rapt attention. The white jade lotus bloomed slowly until it reached its most perfect state. Then, tiny spots of light came out from the center of the blooming petals bit by bit. Those tiny spots of light seemed to want to leave, but were bound by something invisible to a small area of 1 inch above the white jade lotus. Slowly, those tiny spots of light became more and more numerous, and gradually gathered together to form a small bead that shone like a white star. The bead floated above the white jade lotus as it slowly rotated. As it slowly took shape, the perfect white jade lotus in Jiyu's palm also gradually withered and withered. In the end, it turned into a wisp of smoke and disappeared into thin air. Jiyu withdrew his hand, and the small bead fell into his palm. He took Gu Xingyin's hand and put the small bead into her palm. What is this? Gu Xingyin asked curiously. The small white bead in her palm was slightly cold to the touch. When she held it in her palm, there seemed to be a steady stream of gentle power that seeped into her body. It was so comfortable that the tens of thousands of spiritual cavities in her body could not help but stretch out. Jiyu looked at her with a smile. This is a primordial treasure formed by the essence of tens of thousands of primordial lotus seeds in our small chaotic world, the lotus heart. The small chaotic world was the name he gave to the small world he was born in. Since it was born out of chaos, there were still wisps of chaos energy left in that small world even now. He had sensed that the lotus heart was about to take shape, so he specially returned to the small chaotic world. Hearing his words, Gu Xingyin instantly understood that this was a very rare treasure. The tens of thousands of lotus seeds in the small chaotic world were not ordinary lotuses. That day in her dream, she saw clearly that after Jiyu's original body, the chaotic green lotus, was born in the chaos, the remaining chaotic chi entered the newly born world, and then gave birth to everything in the world. After the birth of the chaotic green lotus, the remaining gray chi and the spiritual chi emitted by the chaotic green lotus fell into other places in the small chaotic world, and formed tens of thousands of lotus seeds. It could be said that the lotuses in the small chaotic world were all derivatives of the chaotic green lotus. In terms of preciousness, each lotus could be regarded as a top primordial spiritual treasure in the untainted land. The heart of the lotus was formed from the essence of tens of thousands of connate numinous treasures. It was a unique connate cardinal treasure. Jiyu looked at her lover gently. Strictly speaking, your original body is also a lotus. It will be good for you to carry this with you. As for himself, this lotus core might be precious to others, but it was of little value to him. In terms of strength alone, Jiyu was already an undying existence that surpassed the heaven Tao. Needless to say, the Chaos Lotus was the most powerful chaos treasure in the world. Gu Xingyin knew what he meant and didn't argue with him. With a flash of light in her hand, the bead was wrapped around her neck by a thin silver thread. Am I pretty? She looked up at her lover with a smile. Jiyu gently hugged her body. Maya-in, no matter what, you are the most beautiful. His Majesty the Demon Lord had come out of seclusion. That was not the main point. The main point was that His Majesty the Demon Lord was said to have gained great enlightenment in his seclusion, and his strength suddenly increased dramatically. And the most important thing after he came out of seclusion, besides accompanying the Demon Lord, was to issue a challenge to the various experts of the demon race. Chapter 21-29. No one could figure out what the demon lord meant by this. But Gu Xingyin knew. She knew that this man was angry, even if she didn't say it, and the servants didn't dare to say it. As long as Ji Yu wanted to know what happened in this world, there was nothing that he couldn't know. Of course, Ji Yu knew why. When he and Yin showed such a good relationship, there would still be people who dared to try to get between the two of them when he wasn't around. The reason was very simple. That was, the only one these demons truly respected was their demon emperor. And for him, the demon lord, all their respect was based on the fact that the demon emperor liked him. When Ji Yu returned to this small world and found out what had happened, he found it funny. He wasn't angry at Gu Xingyin, or even at others, but he felt that he had to let this person from the demon emperor mountain open his eyes wide and take a good look. He, Ji Yu, was not a pitiful person who had to rely on his lover to gain the respect of others. Only Gu Xingyin saw through Ji Yu's intentions. She saw through it and didn't stop him. Whatever her lover liked to do, as long as it didn't affect anything important, she would let him do it. Thus, the members of the demon clan were stunned. Starting from the slightly weaker demon clan, Ji Yu issued a challenge almost every day. However, the demons couldn't refuse. Firstly, Ji Yu's words were very polite. He had always been curious about the spells and cultivation methods of the demon clan, and wanted to spar with everyone. Secondly, Ji Yu's identity was the demon lord of the demon clan after all, and the demons didn't dare to casually reject him, especially when the demon lord caused such a big commotion. But there was no reaction from the demon emperor palace. What did this mean? It meant that the demon lord's actions, at least the demon emperor agreed. Since His Majesty the demon emperor didn't mind, they could only play along with His Majesty the demon monarch. This was what the demons thought at the beginning. In their eyes, no matter how talented He Qianglu was, he only had a few decades of cultivation. How powerful could he be? However, reality quickly gave them a blow. Crushing. It couldn't even be considered a battle. It was a one-sided crushing without any obstacles. His Majesty, the demon lord, who was dressed in a long green robe and had a handsome face, did not even draw his sword. For half a month, he sent his opponent to the ground with just one move each time. It was the same today. Ji Yu nodded at the demon clan with a complicated expression, and left the arena without looking back. In front of him, the countless demons watching the battle consciously opened up a path for him. At this moment, the way the demon race looked at Ji Yu was very different. Ji Yu sensed these changes. Her expression did not change, but her gaze softened slightly. Is it fun? As soon as he entered the palace, he saw his lover waiting for him. Ji Yu shook his head. Seeing him like this, Gu Xingyin couldn't help but laugh. You really think you're He Qianglu? What's the point of bullying these little guys? The little fellows she was referring to were naturally the demons. Based on Ji Yu and Gu Xingyin's real age, these demons were indeed little fellows. Ji Yu's expression was indifferent. I just think that they should have a good understanding of their own strength. Of course, the most important thing was to let them have a deep understanding of their own strength. Ji Yu thought silently. Chapter 21-30. In the next month or so, Ji Yu resolutely continued his sparring. When he sliced off the crown of one of the 8 great demon kings of the Demon Emperor Mountain, the entire Demon Emperor Mountain was silent. The demon clans who had never taken the demon lord seriously looked at the not-so-imposing figure with a look of awe in their eyes. The demon clan had always respected the strong. Those demons who had been defeated by Ji Yu did not feel that it was humiliating to be defeated by the demon lord. On the contrary, they were all very excited. No matter how powerful he was still the demon lord of the demon clan, wasn't he? Their demon clan had gained another powerful expert out of nowhere. This was a matter worthy of celebration. And those demons who had always been secretly jealous of He Qianglu and thought that he had made the demon lord fall in love with him at first sight because of his face. Finally, they gave up. Not only did our demon lord have a face, he was also very cultured. No wonder he could make the powerful demon lord fall in love with him at first sight. In this way, Ji Yu successfully blocked the thoughts of those little demons who wanted to climb into his lover's bed once and for all. It could be said that he was quite scheming. In the Demon Lord Palace, Gu Xingyin was overjoyed. She had never thought that Ji Yu would actually play such a trick. Seeing her laughing, Ji Yu was a little helpless. Is it that funny? Gu Xingyin nodded repeatedly. Of course, in my heart. You have always been like the clouds in the sky. How could you do such a down-to-earth thing? Ji Yu could not help but laugh when he heard this. He reached out and carefully tidied up Gu Xingyin's hair that was messed up because of her laughter just now. Then he held her shoulder and said seriously, Ain, the me you are talking about is the me in everyone's eyes. Only the me now will be jealous because of you. The me who is scheming because of you is the real Ji Yu who belongs to you alone. Gu Xingyin, who was caught off guard by the confession, was completely satisfied. She took the initiative to wrap her arms around her lover's neck and pressed her forehead against his. She smiled and said, No matter what you look like, you will always be my favorite. Hearing the faint sounds coming from the bedroom, Vicky and Qi Ji, who were guarding the outer hall, looked at each other and tacitly retreated. From the looks of it, the two majesties would not come out for at least 3 to 5 days. Gu Xingyin and Ji Yu had stayed in this world for over 1,000 years. After the previous Demon Emperor and Demon Empress gave birth to their second child and sent him to the Demon Emperor Palace, Gu Xingyin happened to raise this younger brother. When his younger brother turned 500 years old, Gu Xingyin imitated Bai Yin's parents and threw the responsibility to the sky-devouring python, who had just reached adulthood. Then, he brought Demon Lord to travel around the world. After a few more decades, the two of them had played around in this world and arrived at the space-time boundary of this cultivation world. See you in the next world. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Then they stepped into the crack in front of them. A huge tearing force was transmitted to her body. Gu Xingyin closed her eyes and waited for the arrival of the next honeymoon. So painful. This was the only feeling Gu Xingyin had at this moment. It was as if a heavy blow had landed on her body. Gu Xingyin scanned with her divine sense and knew that the original body of this body was being beaten up. Recommended the novel Transmigration System. Male God Strategy Guide, by the super promiscuous gay friend Huan Chu. Although the person is promiscuous, the novel is very reliable. Also, the new novel is starting number 2. Everyone, don't be anxious. Chapter 2131. It hurts. Gu Xingyin didn't have time to think about what was going on. She rolled on the ground and avoided the attacks of those people. She half-squatted and looked coldly at the people not far in front of her. There were 3 girls and 1 boy, wearing the same uniform. Seeing her reaction, the 4 people were obviously very surprised. The girl in the lead with thin curly hair glanced at her and sneered. Our plasticine knows how to dodge? As soon as she said this, the people around her also laughed. Their laughter was full of disdain for Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin stood up slowly, ignoring the soreness and discomfort in her body. She looked at the 4 people one by one and said, Zhangqin Luyan Su Duo He Kai. Her expression didn't change much, but when they heard their names being called out from those pale lips, the 4 of them suddenly shivered inexplicably. Zhangqin, the leader, was secretly annoyed that she was frightened by a cowardly idiot. She stood out and snorted. What? Our punching bag, plasticine, finally decided to rebel? She even learned to play tricks? Let me tell you, Zhou Qi. I've said before that people like you don't deserve to stay in our class at all. You're simply dragging down the average level of our class. Slap. A loud slap resounded in this remote corner. Zhang Qin covered her face with one hand and looked in shock at the pale girl who had appeared in front of her without her knowing. How could it be? How could Zhou Qi, that coward, have the guts to hit her? After a short period of shock, what was left was overwhelming shame and anger. She almost screamed with a twisted face. You bitch, as she shouted. She raised her hand and was about to slap Gu Xingyin's face. Her impression of the person in front of her was still the Zhou Qi, who didn't even dare to say a word when they bullied her. However, the person in front of her was Gu Xingyin. She easily caught Zhang Qin's hand and slapped her with the back of her hand. Zhang Qin was thrown to the ground by the huge force of the slap. Gu Xingyin lowered her eyes and looked at her. Zhang Qin, I've been in this school for 1.5 semesters, and you've brought people to block me for a total of 7 times. You've locked me in the maintenance bathroom twice. You've beaten and insulted me at will 19 times, and you've thrown away my homework 13 times. She said these words in a calm tone. These things clearly happened to her, but when this girl talked about it, her face was expressionless. It was as if she was talking about something that had nothing to do with her. This Zhou Qi made the students feel unfamiliar and inexplicably afraid. Her cold eyes swept over the other people and she continued to read in a flat tone. Lu Yan, together with Zhou Qi, beat me 13 times, put worms in my cup twice, threw away my school bag 3 times. It was as if a spell had been cast on them as they listened to her recount the things she had done one by one in a daze. He Kai, the only boy, was the first to come to his senses. He frowned and looked at Gu Xingyin. At the same time, he comforted the others. Don't be frightened by her. I think Zhou Qi must have read something in a book and deliberately pretended to be mysterious to scare us. Chapter 2132. Hearing Hikai's words, the rest of the girls who had some doubts in their hearts were instantly relieved. Well, it had been more than a year. Who didn't know what kind of person Zhou Qi was? She must be pretending to be mysterious and deliberately scaring them. Besides, there were 4 of them here. Even if Zhou Qi's personality had changed, how could she turn the tables in their hands? Thinking of this, Zhang Qin, who had been helped up by many people, glared fiercely at Gu Xingyin with half of her face swollen. Hikai is right. This little B***TCH has grown courage today. She actually dared to resist. Today we'll teach her how to behave properly. She looked at the few people around her and said, Don't show mercy to this little B***TCH. How dare she hit me? We must teach her a good lesson. I'll invite you to Blue Ocean later. Blue Ocean was a very famous bar in this city. It was famous for its high prices. Even the average middle-level white-collar workers had to consider the price carefully. For students like them it was completely sky-high. But this was not a problem for Zhang Qin at all. As the second-generation child of a wealthy family, Zhang Qin's friends and acquaintances were mostly brought over by money. At that moment, when everyone heard her words, they were all refreshed. Without saying anything, they approached Gu Xingyin. This action was exactly what Gu Xingyin wanted. Coincidentally, she had also made up her mind to settle the score with her classmates. 3 minutes later, in this dim corner, for people were already lying down, Gu Xingyin was not biased at all. The 4 people's faces were all swollen, not to mention their bodies. She did not show any mercy at all. They were in severe pain, but they were not unconscious and could not move. Gu Xingyin walked to them slowly and slowly took out their mobile phones one by one. In front of them, she opened them, broke the cards inside, and threw them into the abandoned sink. Then, as if they were dragging garbage, after 2 trips, all of them were sent to the corner of the washroom at the end of the corridor that had been abandoned for a long time. Half a month ago, it was them who had locked Zhou Qi in here. After an entire day and night, Zhou Qi was finally found. The girl, who was too frightened, had a high fever and fell seriously ill. She finally rested for more than a week and returned to school, but before she could have a few days of peace, she was blocked by these vicious guys again. This was the old teaching building of the school. It was located in the southeast corner of the school, and was very secluded. Since last year, there had been no students attending classes here. If one did not intentionally pass by this place, even if the people inside shouted themselves hoarse, no one would hear them. Gu Xingyin threw the 4 of them side by side, and walked out in front of them. Then with a click she locked the door. The 4 people inside widened their eyes in shock and anger. They even heard a sinister female voice outside. Oh right, I forgot to tell you. This old teaching building is not peaceful, especially this washroom. Someone once committed suicide here. If you see anything unclean at night, don't be scared out of your wits. This place was very spacious. The girl's sinister voice echoed eerily in this quiet place. The 4 people lying on the ground, unable to move, all had terrified expressions on their faces. 2 more I continued to write. Chapter 2133. Gu Xingyin turned around and went out with her school bag without any psychological burden. These things, even the words she just said, were all done to her by these people in the past. It was just that when those people abused others, they casually said those vicious words, but she probably didn't take it to heart at all. Now only when they experienced it themselves would they know how terrible it was, right? At this time, there were not many people in the school, and Gu Xingyin walked alone in the school without attracting any attention. Carrying her school bag, she followed the memory of this body and slowly walked in a direction. After many turns, Gu Xingyin finally came to her home, after passing through one remote alley after another. If she didn't see it with her own eyes, it would be hard to imagine that such a shabby place could exist in such a developed city. The ground was bumpy, and black dirty water flowed freely along the uneven gullies. In the hot April weather, it emitted a strange smell that was both rancid and stinky. There were all kinds of stalls selling goods on electric tricycles, and some people squatted by the roadside to eat on small plastic stools. There were even people who directly hung their private underwear outside to dry. Gu Xingyin walked through all this with a wooden expression, and turned into an old building on the left. It was very shabby, and the walls were mottled with various scratches and gray mud after white paint fell off. The walkway was also very messy, with all kinds of garbage piled up. The young couple on the second floor was quarreling again. Gu Xingyin frowned and walked to the third floor. She took out the key and opened the door. This was a small one-bedroom apartment. Although it was very small, it was kept as clean as possible. There was no refrigerator. Gu Xingyin looked at a small space on the side that was used as a kitchen. There was only a half-open packet of noodles and 2 scallions. She had no appetite, so she sat on the bed in the room and began to recall the experience of this body. Zhou Qi's parents divorced when she was very, very young. Her mother left the city without any reluctance, and there was no news of her since then. Her father also disliked this burden, so he directly threw his young daughter to her old mother and went out to indulge in debauchery alone. Ever since she was a child, Zhou Qi could only remember her grandmother who cooked delicious noodles with eggs for her. As for her father, he only saw him a few times a year, and every time they met, that stubbled man would only scold him loudly in disdain. Then, when she was 10 years old, she received news of the man's death. He had drunk too much and died suddenly. Her grandmother cried loudly, but Zhou Qi's face was numb. To her grandmother, her father was her own flesh and blood, but to Zhou Qi, that man was just someone she hated more than a stranger. This kind of experience since childhood caused Zhou Qi to have an inferiority complex and timid character. Ever since she was young, she had always been an invisible person in any class. She always lowered her head and shrunk her shoulders, wishing that the whole world would not notice her. In addition, there were rumors that she was a wild child without parents. Every time her classmates saw that she only had 2 pieces of old clothes other than her school uniform, they naturally looked down on her. She was the target of bullying in school since she was young. Children in their teens did not know what it meant to be malicious. They probably didn't know how much damage their casual and willful bullying would cause to a young heart. Chapter 2134. Zhou Qi was the only one who lived here. Her grandmother passed away when she was in her 2nd year of junior high school. In the past 2 years, she had relied on some subsidies from the school and the government, and occasionally did some odd jobs to make a living. Speaking of odd jobs, the only thing Zhou Qi could do at her age was to wash dishes and do odd jobs in some small private fast food restaurants around. Gu Xingyin looked around and sighed softly. After she came into this body, she did her best to modify her body's functions. It would not affect her at all if she did not eat for a day or 2. The most important thing now was to improve the living conditions of this body. Of course, the school was the most important thing. In Zhou Qi's memory, she had been bullied quite a lot. However, what was the result of the incident? Her kind and strict head teacher called her to the office and talked to her for more than half an hour. In the end, this incident was determined to be a small quarrel among classmates. Not to mention compensation, there was not even an apology. It was because of the school's non-interference and even indulgence that Zhang Qin and her group became more and more fearless. Thinking of the number 1 middle school in B City, which was the school Zhou Qi studied in, Gu Xingyin's face turned cold. Not only those who had bullied her, but also this school. She would slowly return everything that they had given Zhou Qi, one by one. Gu Xingyin's eyes suddenly lit up. She turned around and looked at the door. At the same time, the door, which had been tightly closed after she entered, suddenly opened automatically. Standing outside the door was a young man in a snow-white shirt with a noble temperament. At first glance, one could tell that he did not belong to this place. Gu Xingyin smiled when she saw him. "You're here so soon?" The young man, or Jiyu, walked in and looked around. He did not care that Gu Xingyin's school uniform was dirty because of the previous bullying. He hugged her tightly in his arms. "I'm sorry to let you suffer." Gu Xingyin said carelessly. "Who can let me suffer? I left this behind before I came." Needless to say, both of them knew what he meant by before. Gu Xingyin glanced at Jiyu and said angrily, "I say, why did I become like this and you can be the young master of a rich family? It's too unfair." Hearing this, Jiyu smiled. "What's mine isn't it all yours?" That one sentence successfully soothed his lover. Jiyu lowered her head, and their foreheads touched. Several messages were instantly transmitted to Gu Xingyin's mind. His identity in this world was the young master of a very famous family in B City's political circles. He had a sister who was a strong woman in politics who had inherited the family business. He also had a brother who was doing well in the business world. As for him, he was born with heart disease and had been in poor health since he was young. He had always been like a crystal prince in the family. Jiyu had only arrived in this body after the crystal prince had suddenly died of an illness. Of course, after he came over, although he could not completely cure the heart disease in order to not attract attention, he could control it so that it would not have a relapse for the rest of his life. When Gu Xingyin knew what had happened to Jiyu, Jiyu also knew what had happened to Zhou Qi's body. Update delivered. Good night, everyone. Q3. Chapter 2135. Shall I take you out of here? He said. With his ability and conditions, he could change Gu Xingyin to a better environment and living conditions. Gu Xingyin refused him. Don't worry about it for the time being. Hearing this, Jiyu glanced at her, seeming to be puzzled. Gu Xingyin smiled. This kind of external environment won't have any effect on me now. She lowered her head to look at herself and said, in any case, I've taken over her body. It can be considered fate. Those who owe her, I have to repay them on her behalf. Jiyu didn't say anything. He just took out a bank card from his pocket. Take this. At least change to a better place to live and live a better life. Although he knew that his lover didn't care about these things and no one could hurt her, Jiyu still hoped that Gu Xingyin could live a better life. This time, Gu Xingyin didn't refuse. Before they said a few words, Jiyu's cell phone rang in his pocket. He answered the phone, and it seemed to be his family on the other side. Gu Xingyin looked at Jiyu and said a few words indifferently before hanging up the phone. He turned around and looked at Gu Xingyin. Ain, I have to go back now. Gu Xingyin nodded. Jiyu's body, Qinshiza, was doted on by his family on the one hand because of his poor health since he was a child, and on the other hand, they were particularly concerned about his whereabouts. This time, he didn't go home at this time, which naturally made his family very worried. He looked at Gu Xingyin and couldn't help but remind her. Remember to change to a better place to live, and then go out to eat better, and buy some comfortable clothes. His unfinished words disappeared between the two of them as their lips pressed against each other. The afterglow of the setting sun refracted through the small window, gently falling on the kissing boy in white shirt and the girl in uniform, leaving a beautiful silhouette on the not-so-white wall. Gu Xingyin gently bit Jiyu's beautiful thin lips and said with a smile, I know, little housekeeper. Jiyu raised her eyebrows and retorted, I will only take care of your family. The next day, Gu Xingyin was still dressed in an inconspicuous school uniform. She carried her backpack and walked slowly into the school. As usual, no one noticed her. She walked straight to the darkest corner of the classroom. This was the place with the worst environment in the entire classroom. It was close to the trash can, and there was no sunlight all year round. No one was willing to sit here, and Zhou Qi wouldn't resist. Since the first month of school, She had become a resident here. The high school seats were piled high with books. Zhou Qi was so small that she couldn't even see the top of her head when she sat down. One could imagine how difficult it was for her to listen to the class. Gu Xingyin sat quietly and listened to the self-study bell ring. As expected, Zhang Qin and the others didn't come for the morning self-study. Those girls usually liked to play, so it wasn't strange for them to not go home for a night. At this time, no one had found that they were missing, right? The students in the class looked at them strangely, but they didn't care too much. Those students were in the small group with the best family conditions in the class, so they naturally didn't take their studies seriously. It was no big deal for them to miss the morning self-study. In this way, it wasn't until the third class in the morning that the head teacher, Lu Hong, found that something was wrong. Chapter 2136. After the fourth class at noon, Gu Xingyin heard the voice of the head teacher, Lu Hong. Zhou Qi, come to my office after class. These words were said in the classroom. Almost as soon as the head teacher finished speaking, the eyes of the whole class fell on Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin's expression didn't change at all. She just said, "Oh." Her calm appearance was naturally interpreted as dullness in Lu Hong's eyes. She glanced at Gu Xingyin impatiently and left the classroom without saying anything. The fourth class. After class, the students in the class all went to the school cafeteria in groups. Of course, many people who didn't like the food in the cafeteria would choose to eat at the snack bar. Gu Xingyin stood up silently and walked toward the cafeteria. The school cafeteria, which was despised by countless students, had always been delicious to Zhou Qi, because it was too expensive. After knowing that Zhou Qi's daily diet was steamed buns with chili sauce for lunch and noodles for dinner, if she was more extravagant, she would add an egg to the noodles. Gu Xingyin understood that a high school student was only as tall as a middle school student. When it was time to eat, of course she would go to eat. As for the head teacher, eating was the most important thing. She just waited. Gu Xingyin slowly went to the cafeteria and ordered 2 meat dishes and 1 vegetable dish. After eating, she went to the head teacher, Lu Hong's office. Lu Hong and others were waiting angrily. When they saw Gu Xingyin, they didn't look very good. Zhou Qi, I asked you to come to my office after class. Did you turn a deaf ear to my words? If it were an ordinary student, they might really be scared out of their wits. But who was Gu Xingyin? She didn't even lift her eyelids and calmly replied, I was very hungry. I went to have lunch. Lu Hong was very angry at her words. She called several students' parents in the morning and confirmed that they didn't go home. The students' cell phones couldn't be contacted. She was very anxious. How could she be in the mood to eat? At this moment, seeing Gu Xingyin's leisurely and calm appearance, she felt a burst of anger in her heart. However, she really didn't have any problems with it. It was natural for people to eat. How could you stop her from saying no? Therefore, she only looked upset and questioned Gu Xingyin. I heard from a few classmates that after school yesterday, Zhang Qin, Duo He Kai, and Lu Yan went to look for you. What happened? When Gu Xingyin heard this, a strange smile appeared on her face. It was like mockery and disdain on her palm-sized pale face that was covered by her bangs. No matter how one looked at it, there was a strange feeling that made one's heart turn cold. Lu Hong had such a feeling at the moment. She took a closer look. The girl standing in front of her was still the silent and even stupefied Zhou Qi. She breathed a sigh of relief and thought to herself that she was indeed under too much pressure. Gu Xingyin said softly, Teacher, I've been looked for by Zhang Qin and the others so many times. Why didn't you ask about it? So many times naturally referred to the many times that Zhou Qi had been bullied. Lu Hong was rendered speechless by the question. Why didn't she ask? Of course, she had long known what had happened in secret. It was just that Zhou Qi's family didn't have parents to support her, and she couldn't compare with Zhang Qin and the others who always sent her things in private. After weighing the pros and cons, she naturally turned a blind eye to it. It was just that this kind of thing was pointed out by a student in front of her, which really made her lose face. Chapter 2137. She put on a stern face and said sternly, Zhou Qi, Is this how you speak to your teacher? The teacher is asking you a question, and you're just trying to change the subject? Do you have any respect for me as your form teacher? Was she trying to oppress her? Gu Xingyin stared at Lu Hong with her clear eyes and grinned. No. What? Lu Hong was stunned, and then she was furious. She was rebelling. This Zhou Qi, did she eat a leopard's guts today? How dare she talk back to her teacher so openly? At this time, Zhou Hong looked at Gu Xingyin with more and more disgust. She was very snobbish to begin with. She had always treated the students in her class who were not well off or had poor grades as invisible people. Not to mention people like Zhou Qi. Her grades were terrible, she had no family, she didn't know how to cause trouble, and she didn't know how to speak well. In less than a year, Lu Hong had thought of ways to transfer Zhou Qi out of her class countless times. Previously, the words that Zhang Qin and the others had said to Gu Xingyin, "The existence of people like you is simply dragging down the average level of our class," had come from Lu Hong's mouth. It was hard to imagine that this was something that a teacher could say. Lu Hong was very angry. At the same time, she thought that this was a good opportunity to get rid of Zhou Qi, this troublemaker. As she thought this, a trace of expression naturally appeared on her face. She looked at Gu Xingyin with a bitter and hateful expression, as if her heart was aching. Zhou Qi, when you first came to my class, I was thinking that although your grades were not good and you were not popular in class, as a teacher, as a form teacher, I have an obligation to take care of every student and not give up on any of them. I have never had any prejudice against you, but you have disappointed me too much. After saying this, she seemed very satisfied and concluded, "Since you are not satisfied with me as a teacher, I also feel that there is no way to teach you. I will report to the Academic Affairs Office and explain." Teacher. A soft female voice interrupted her. Lu Hong looked over with some dissatisfaction. She saw a thin and small girl staring at her innocently with a pair of big eyes. The words that came out of her mouth almost made her unable to breathe. "Teacher Lu, what I'm saying is that I didn't see Zhang Qin and her classmates yesterday." "What are you talking about?" Lu Hong. She looked at the girl who seemed to be very obedient standing in front of her, and only felt that she was speechless. Gu Xingyin looked at her calmly, as if he was extremely obedient. Lu Hong was very stifled. She had originally planned to expel Zhou Qi in the name of disrespecting her teacher, but she had not expected Zhou Qi to say such words. What could she say? She could only hold it in. Blame yourself for being too dramatic. However, she didn't believe Gu Xingyin's words at all. She looked at Gu Xingyin suspiciously and said coldly, "Zhou Qi, don't lie in front of the teacher. I have asked several students, and they all said that they saw Zhang Qin, and the others go to find you with their own eyes. Why did you lie to me?" Gu Xingyin's mouth twitched. "I didn't lie to you. Zhang Qin and the others did come to find me. They were bored and wanted to bully me. I am not a fool. If I can't provoke them, can't I avoid them?" Chapter 2138. She looked at Lu Hong calmly and said, "So when I saw them coming to find me, I ran away." Lu Hong. To be honest, in her heart, Zhou Qi was not much different from a fool in the past. It seemed to be the first time she met this student. It turned out that Zhou Qi was such a sharp-tongued student, but Lu Hong did not believe what she said. Her intuition told her that the disappearance of Zhang Qin and the others must have something to do with Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin was a little amused as he watched her constantly changing expressions. There were many places in the school that did not have surveillance cameras, and she was a marginalized figure in the class. Who would notice her movements? Even when she went out of the school gate, Gu Xingyin chose the blind spots of the surveillance cameras. Even if the school pulled out the surveillance records at the school gate, there was no way to find out when she left the school. Lu Hong thought for a while and suddenly said to Gu Xingyin sternly, "Zhou Qi, don't lie. Many students saw you and Zhang Qin leave. Let me tell you, if you tell me the truth now, I can still help you solve this matter. Otherwise, I can only call the police." She lowered her voice and said to Gu Xingyin with a serious face, "If you call the police, the school will not be able to suppress it. This kind of thing can go to jail." Upon hearing that, Gu Xingyin played along and put on a fearful expression. Lu Hong was proud in her heart. She was indeed a poor student who had not seen the world. She was suppressed by the word "call the police." She would definitely answer all the questions later. Then she heard the other party's weak voice. "Then teacher, let's call the police quickly? It's such a serious matter. It's better to call the police and let the police handle it." Lu Hong looked at Gu Xingyin's clear eyes and felt very aggrieved. She felt that the other party was doing it on purpose. This matter must have something to do with her, this Zhou Qi. She said coldly. "In this case, Zhou Qi, I can only report it to the school and the police. I only hope that you won't regret it." Gu Xingyin yawned. "Okay, teacher. If there's nothing else, I'll go back and take a nap." Lu Hong held back for a long time before she managed to resist the urge to throw the surrounding lesson plans directly at the other party's face. She watched as Gu Xingyin walked out of the office, her face full of anger. Motherf **Cur. In the empty office, the female teacher with a gentle appearance cursed. Gu Xingyin could imagine how Lu Hong would react. That was her personality. They bullied the kind and feared the evil. They were used to hugging the big shots. But what did this have to do with her? Gu Xingyin took a nap without any psychological burden. And then she was called to the office again in the afternoon. This time, in addition to Lu Hong, there was also the school's dean, a middle-aged man who looked a little familiar. Judging from his title, he was the vice principal. There were also 2 policemen in uniform standing beside him. Zhou Qi's timid look made Lu Hong angry. Zhou Qi was not like this when they were in the office at noon. She did not speak, but the dean frowned and looked at her sternly. "Student Zhou Qi, I heard that yesterday you contacted a few students in our school who didn't come to class today?" Gu Xingyin sneered in her heart. He was indeed a powerful dean. The moment he came, he put such a big label on her. Today's update. Remember to eat a few more big rice dumplings during the Dragon Boat Festival. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation. Chapter 2139. She sneered in her heart, but her body trembled with the dean's words. She even took a small step back in fright, looking at the dean with a pair of big eyes in horror. The dean. Looking at her, those who didn't know the truth might think that he had done something to her. Obviously, the 2 policemen didn't know the truth. They glanced at the tall and busted dean, and then looked at the pale and thin Gu Xingyin. It was self-evident which one they favored in their hearts. One of the younger policemen saw Gu Xingyin's white t-shirt under her school uniform jacket, and thought of his sister who was spoiled by the whole family. He had mixed feelings for a while. He couldn't help but take a step forward and said softly to Gu Xingyin, "Zhou Qi, your name is Zhou Qi, right? Don't be afraid. We're just here to ask a routine question." Gu Xingyin lowered her head and didn't say anything, but she obviously relaxed a lot. The policeman asked about what happened after school last night. The young policeman noticed that after he asked this question, the little girl in front of him immediately had a look of horror on her face. He couldn't help but frown, wondering what this little girl had encountered that caused her to reveal such an expression of extreme fear. Gu Xingyin didn't come here today without saying anything. On the contrary, she wanted to say not only what they wanted to know, but also something that the school didn't want people to know. In the eyes of the teachers and the policemen, this little girl was scared out of her wits when she heard the names of Zhang Qin and the others. In the eyes of the head teacher, Lu Hong, this was a sign of a guilty conscience. She couldn't help but say, "Zhou Qi, the leaders and the policemen are here today. If you really did something, it's not too late to say it now." Another big accusation was put on her. It seemed that she was sure that this matter had something to do with her. Gu Xingyin finally raised her head. They were surprised to find that her face was full of tears. Gu Xingyin shivered and replied, "Yesterday after school, Zhang Qin and the others did come to find me." Hearing this, Lu Hong was delighted. She asked repeatedly, "They came to find you, and then what? Where did you go? What did you do to them? Why are they still nowhere to be seen?" The 2 policemen on the side frowned. How could there be such a teacher who tried to put the blame on a student when there was no evidence? The young policeman stepped forward and stood between Lu Hong and Gu Xingyin. He said to Gu Xingyin gently, "Zhou Qi, don't be afraid. Tell us what happened yesterday." He completely did not believe that such a weak and delicate little girl could do anything. Gu Xingyin nodded and continued. When Zhang Qin and the others came to me yesterday, I was very scared. I knew that they were going to beat me again, and they were going to tear my books and homework. When she spoke of this, there was still a look of lingering fear on her face. The head teacher and the dean's expressions were a little ugly. This kind of thing could be considered a scandal in the school, and it was a little embarrassing in front of outsiders. The dean coughed softly and said, Zhou Qi, let's not talk about such insignificant things. Just tell us what happened. Chapter 2140. The two policemen looked at each other and saw the anger in each other's eyes. When the students in the school suffered such treatment, as teachers and school leaders, their reaction was, is this just an insignificant matter? Especially the young policeman, because he had a younger sister who was about the same age as Gu Xingyin. He naturally cherished her. He immediately frowned and asked, Zhou Qi, according to what you said, have you been treated like this before? This is violence. Didn't you report it to the teachers in the class? As he spoke, he glanced at Lu Hong. Gu Xingyin just continued to say in a low voice with a pale face, I told Miss Lu, but she said it was a small joke between classmates and asked me not to disturb her. Lu Hong's face became very ugly. She knew very well what was going on, and this reason was just a perfunctory excuse. Anyway, Zhou Qi didn't have any parents at home, and she didn't know anyone who could support her. It was just a perfunctory excuse. Who knew that she would say it at this time? And in front of the policemen. When the two policemen heard this, their faces were already very ugly. It turned out that the little girl in front of him was the victim. Those missing students, on normal days, actually played the role of the bully? The young policeman said to the vice principal seriously, Principal Zhang, about what Zhou Qi said. We will cooperate with your school after dealing with this matter. The vice principal's smile was a little awkward. He said dryly, we'll talk about it later. The matter at hand is more important. The two policemen also knew the priority, so they could only continue to ask Gu Xingyin. After all, according to what she said, those missing students did have something to do with her. Gu Xingyin just shook her head. I was afraid of being beaten. When I saw them come to me, of course I ran away without saying anything. I ran straight home and didn't meet those students again. The implication was that they had nothing to do with her. After hearing Gu Xingyin's words, the people in the office looked at each other. According to Gu Xingyin's words, the clue that they had found with great difficulty was cut off just like that. The two teachers in the school were naturally unwilling to accept this. One had to know that the schools that were missing now were the schools with better family conditions. Now the parents of the other schools had already received the news, and were on their way to the school. If they were to cause a ruckus, how would they clean up the mess? They didn't believe Gu Xingyin's words at all, and wanted to interrogate her again. However, the two policemen believed that a young girl like Gu Xingyin wouldn't have anything to do with the disappearance of the students, and let her go back to rest. Gu Xingyin thanked the two policemen and walked out of the classroom quietly. She didn't go home directly. Instead, she closed her eyes and stood on the street for a while. She accurately found a young man who was carrying a SLR camera in front of his chest and dressed very low-key. What's the matter, little girl? The young man saw Gu Xingyin standing in front of him and hurriedly asked. Gu Xingyin raised her head and looked at him very calmly. I know you're looking for news material now. The man looked at her in surprise. Then Gu Xingyin asked word by word, school violence. Are you interested in this topic? Chapter 2141. Gu Xingyin chatted with the reporter for a long time. Finally, when she got up and left, she glanced at the reporter's eyes. You didn't meet anyone in particular today. What you know about school violence is what you saw with your own eyes. In the next few days, you will sneak into the school and see for yourself what kind of attitude B City No. 1 Middle School has towards this matter. The reporter nodded with a dazed expression. Gu Xingyin turned and left. About 5 minutes later, the reporter suddenly came back to his senses as if he had been patted by someone. He was a little stunned about what he had just done, but soon intense emotions filled his mind. I didn't expect that the school, which has such a good reputation, would condone such an outrageous thing. When he thought of what he had seen by chance not long ago, anger surged in his heart. School violence, right? He wanted to expose the disgusting truth of the school. He started to do it. The young reporter looked firmly in the direction of the school and was ready to go back to prepare the materials immediately. Gu Xingyin returned home after dinner. If nothing unexpected happened, the police would be able to find those guys in the abandoned teaching building tonight. Then tomorrow, there would be a lot of work to do. Sure enough, when she arrived at school the next day, she was immediately called by the class monitor. Zhou Qi, Teacher Lu asked you to go to her office when you arrive at school. The class monitor was a tall and thin boy. He was a good person and was very popular in the class. He whispered to Gu Xingyin. Teacher Lu seems to be very angry. Gu Xingyin nodded. Thank you. She put down her school bag and walked toward the head teacher's office without any burden. It was still early, and Lu Hong was the only teacher in the office. Zhou Qi. Lu Hong's face darkened when she saw her walk in. Stand next to the wall. What did you say when we asked you yesterday? That you have nothing to do with the missing students? Do you think you'll be fine if no one finds out? Those students have been found, and they all said that you locked them in the abandoned teaching building. You're simply lawless. Lu Hong seems to be very angry. Seeing that Gu Xingyin is still silent with her head down, she seems to feel very unaccomplished. She picked up a book and threw it at Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin's eyes moved slightly. She could have dodged it, but she thought of something and stood there motionless, allowing the book to hit her. The sharp corner of the book scratched her forehead, leaving a shocking wound. Almost in an instant, dark red blood flowed down from Gu Xingyin's forehead, contrasting with her pale face, making her look even more pitiful. Seeing her like this, Lu Hong's anger dissipated a little. However, her tone was still very unpleasant. Let me tell you, Zhou Qi, this matter is very serious. Our school has already called the police, and the parents of a few students will come later. Given your situation, we will definitely deal with it seriously and even expel you. Just wait for the police to deal with you. After saying this, she seemed to be very happy and drank a cup of tea in a good mood. Gu Xingyin raised her head and looked at Lu Hong. I didn't. They have nothing to do with me. Lu Hong sneered. You still want to quibble? For students testified that you beat them up like that and locked them from the inside. You still want to quibble? Chapter 2142. Gu Xingyin glanced at her. Between remaining silent and refuting, she chose the former. Anyway, when the others came later, she still had to say what needed to be said. Saying it again now was a complete waste of time and energy. Thus, she quietly leaned against the wall with her head lowered. Others saw her as sad, but in reality, she was just resting with her eyes closed. She didn't know how much time had passed. There was a light knock on the office door. Hearing such a gentle way of knocking on the door, Gu Xingyin roughly knew who it was. She looked up and saw the two policemen from yesterday pushing the door open and walking in. Upon seeing Gu Xingyin, the young policeman was taken aback. He walked up to her anxiously and asked, "What happened to your face? Why is there so much blood?" When Lu Hong heard this, a trace of unnaturalness flashed across her face. She said first, "This child was careless. Teacher Lu hit me," Gu Xingyin said calmly. Lu Hong's words came to an abrupt end. Her eyes were like fire as she glared at Gu Xingyin. This Zhou Qi usually didn't say anything. When she was bullied, she didn't even cry. She thought that the other party would suffer in silence. She didn't expect that she would actually learn to complain. When the young policeman heard this, he looked at Lu Hong angrily. Teacher Lu, as a teacher, it's not good to hit a student, right? Lu Hong thought that since Zhou Qi was already like this, she didn't have to put in any effort to save face. She only said coldly, "Officers, don't forget that the person standing in front of you is the murderer who injured a classmate and locked her in the old teaching building." The young policeman didn't care about her words at all. He squatted down and looked at the scar on Gu Xingyin's forehead with some heartache. "Does it hurt?" Gu Xingyin shook her head. She could block out the pain. Otherwise, she wouldn't have chosen to hurt herself like this. If she wanted to, she could even recover from such a wound in less than a night. Little did she know that her performance was even more heartbreaking in the eyes of outsiders. The police officer looked around and found a pack of clean tissue. He filled a glass with water and wanted to wipe Gu Xingyin carefully. However, Gu Xingyin reacted strongly and tried to break free. What a joke. She wanted to keep this appearance of hers. It was just that he couldn't tell this kind police officer. She could only pretend that she didn't want strangers to get close to her. Seeing her so resistant, the young policeman sighed and didn't insist. He stood up, but Gu Xingyin suddenly raised her head and stared at him without blinking. I didn't do it. He was stunned for a moment before he realized what Gu Xingyin was talking about. He smiled and said softly, Big Brother believes in you. Another middle-aged policeman had been watching this scene silently until now. Only now did he look at Lu Hong, who was sitting at the desk, with a cold expression and said, Last night was just a one-sided statement from a few people involved. We still need to investigate what happened. Teacher, it's best if you don't jump to conclusions. Lu Hong was so angry that her heart hurt. What was going on with these two policemen? It was such a good opportunity. As long as it was determined that it was Zhou Qi, the jinx, who did this, the case could be closed. Wouldn't it be good for everyone to be happy? However, these words couldn't be said directly. For a moment, the office fell into silence. They were all silent, waiting for the arrival of the other people involved. About 10 minutes later, the office door was pushed open rudely. A sharp female voice cursed. I heard that the little bastard who hit my baby daughter is here? Which one is it? I want to see who gave her the guts to do that. A new update was delivered. Chapter 2143. While they were talking, Gu Xingyin saw a middle-aged woman with delicate wavy hair and wearing a branded dress walk into the office with a bad face. The woman's sharp eyes scanned the whole office and soon locked on the target. Gu Xingyin was the only student standing here. Is it you? You're the one called Zhou Qi? The middle-aged woman looked at Gu Xingyin with a critical gaze and suddenly walked up to her and raised her hand. I heard that you're a motherless girl? No wonder you did such a vicious thing. As she spoke, she came to Gu Xingyin's side and raised her hand high and was about to fall, but she was stopped by a hand. It was the young policeman who had been standing beside Gu Xingyin. The young policeman had been frowning since the middle-aged woman walked in. Now he couldn't stand her almost barbaric behavior. Such a domineering mother, no wonder her child bullied her classmates. Madam, please don't hit her. He let go of the woman's hand and tried to be polite. The middle-aged woman turned around impatiently. Seeing him in uniform, she restrained herself a little, but she was still unwilling to give up. What? This girl bullied my daughter. As a mother, I saw my daughter being bullied. Can't I make a decision for my child? The young policeman obviously didn't have enough social experience. He couldn't stand many things, but his mouth wasn't very sharp. He could only emphasize one sentence. It's wrong to hit people. You're an adult, so you can't argue with a child. The woman raised her eyebrows and looked like she was about to lose her temper, but another policeman stood up. He glanced at the woman and said, The truth hasn't come out yet. We're working here. Madam, please don't interfere with our work. The middle-aged woman glared at the two policemen and rolled her eyes at Gu Xingyin, who was being protected by the two policemen, before turning around and walking to the door. The older policeman's face didn't change. He had seen a lot of people over the years. People like the parent today were typical bullies. If you tried to reason with her, she would think that you were afraid of her, and she would become more and more arrogant. He might as well use his power to suppress them. The middle-aged woman quickly pulled a girl in a skirt and walked in. It was Zhang Qin. She was dressed up beautifully, wearing a new dress. Looking at her, there was not a trace of injury on her body. Gu Xingyin laughed in her heart. She had a sense of propriety when she beat them up yesterday. She was sure that those people would suffer enough, and it would not be obvious on the surface. In comparison, Zhou Qi, who still had a bruise on her face and various wounds under her clothes, was definitely much weaker. As soon as Zhang Qin walked into the classroom and saw Gu Xingyin, her expression changed. Zhou Qi, you little b***tch, just you wait. The two policemen looked at each other. No matter how they looked at it, this little girl named Zhou was more like the real victim. Yesterday when they found the students, they were still terrified. One of the girls was even crying. Unexpectedly, after just one night of rest, these people had returned to their original appearance. This was their usual style, right? Gu Xingyin didn't say anything. She just stood quietly behind them with her head lowered. Chapter 2144. It was precisely because of this reaction that everyone felt that her appearance was very distressing. Soon the parents of the other students also came to the office. The originally spacious office became a little cramped because of the arrival of these people. Gu Xingyin suddenly raised her head and looked in the direction of the door. She saw a familiar figure coming in behind many parents. It was the reporter. Reporter Wang Lu took advantage of a loophole. In his line of work, the most important ability was to be flexible. This time, he had thought of a way to find out that the parents of those students had been found. Today the parents would be coming here to seek justice. Usually the entrance of number 1 middle school was very strict, but today, the school told them that the parents of several students would come. Wang Lu followed behind the students and their parents, but no one doubted him. These families were not familiar with each other, so they probably regarded him as a member of each other's family. The first thing Wang Lu saw when he entered the office was Gu Xingyin standing in front of him. He narrowed his eyes. Looking at the people in the office, he turned on the camera and recording equipment on his sleeve without a trace, and then stood quietly behind the people. Mr. Liu, there are 2 policemen. Zhang Qin's mother, who was the woman from before, spoke first. It's very clear that this girl named Zhou has no love for her classmates. She bullied our Qin and other classmates. I don't think I can accept that my daughter is in the same school as such a vicious classmate. The school must respond to this. You police must also act according to the law. Her attitude was quite tough. Gu Xingyin knew very well that most of her confidence came from her superior family conditions. This kind of person was a typical example of a person whose material conditions had improved, but her quality and upbringing still remained at the most primitive and backward level. However, there were many such people in this society. After Zhang Qin's mother finished speaking, she immediately got the agreement of several other parents. I think this parent is right. She is so vicious at such a young age. What will happen when she grows up? Now she dares to do such a thing to her classmates. Who will guarantee my child's safety when she goes to school in the future? She must be severely punished. Reporter Wang Lu didn't say anything. He just silently looked at the girl standing by the side with her head lowered. She was small and thin, standing in front of a group of arrogant adults. She looked so helpless. For a moment, Wang Lu wanted to abandon his journalistic integrity, rush out in front of her, and loudly refute those aggressive parents. If he hadn't seen with his own eyes how this girl was bullied, he might have been brainwashed by their words. But before he could say anything, Gu Xingyin raised her head. She even took a step forward and stepped out from behind the young policeman. The young policeman subconsciously wanted to stop her, but Gu Xingyin's expression was very firm. She said softly, I've been studying in number 1 middle school for nearly a year. And I've also spent nearly a year with Zhang Qin and a few other classmates. Several parents frowned when they heard this. Zhang Qin's mother sneered. How could you do such a thing to a classmate you've known for a year? You're really something. Chapter 2145. Gu Xingyin glanced at the mother and didn't say anything. She just slowly took off her coat. This was also a very strange thing about her. It was already quite hot in April. Everyone else was wearing skirts and short-sleeved shirts, but she was still wearing a school uniform jacket. But after she took off her coat, everyone stopped talking. They could clearly see that on the girl's exposed slender arms, there were all kinds of bruises, as well as dark purple bruises that seemed to be left behind for a long time. These were definitely not marks that could be left behind once or twice. Several parents were surprised and doubtful. The head teacher, Lu Hong's face was a little ugly. The 2 policemen and the reporter, Wang Lu, were full of anger. The young policeman quickly asked, What's going on with your body? There was still some anger in his tone. Just by looking at these scars, he could tell what kind of life this girl had been living in the past. Gu Xingyin held her coat and said slowly, "The latest scars were from last week when Zhang Qin, Su Duoduo, He Kai, and Lu Yan dragged me to the music room and beat me." As soon as these words came out, the atmosphere in the office suddenly changed. The vice principal, who had been standing behind and hadn't spoken, quickly came out to ease the embarrassment. "You child, you said that your injuries were caused by your classmates. Why didn't you tell me?" These words sounded as if this was a reason that Gu Xingyin deliberately made up. Gu Xingyin slowly glanced at the head teacher, who didn't look very good, and replied, "A year ago, when I was beaten for the first time, I told Teacher Lu. Teacher Lu said that it was a small fight between classmates and asked me not to take it to heart." The young policeman looked at Lu Hong in disbelief. "Teacher Lu, your student was beaten. Is this how you deal with it?" Lu Hong's face stiffened. She braced herself and replied, "What, beaten? I've never heard her say that." She was trying to shirk the responsibility. Gu Xingyin suddenly burst into tears. Everyone was shocked by this development. As she cried, she sniffled and said, "Later, when I was bullied again, I also went to find Teacher Lu. She said a few words at first, but later on, she made me wear a long-sleeved jacket and said that I would scare my classmates. She moved me to the back of the class and then ignored me." The office was very quiet, and only the sound of her crying could be heard. Wang Lu clenched his fists tightly. He didn't have any siblings, but he thought that if he had a sister who was bullied at school, he would definitely fight with those people. Lu Hong interrupted her with a stern look. "I suspect that Zhou Qi has a series of hallucinations because she has been undisciplined for a long time, and has been influenced by her family," she said angrily. "I've been a class teacher for more than 10 years, and I've always tried my best to be fair. I treat every student equally as if they were my own children. It's impossible for something like that to exist." The young policeman coldly pointed at the scar on Gu Xingyin's forehead that had already stopped bleeding. "So when Teacher Lu is angry at home, he will also pick up something and throw it at his own daughter's face?" This wave of face slapping was beautiful. Gu Xingyin praised in her heart, but her face showed an expression of disbelief. Her expression of fear and uneasiness, as if she had seen the most unimaginable thing in the world, only made people feel embarrassed and uncomfortable. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.